Hi, welcome to the podcast School of Love, where we want to help you create parent-child relationships where you can talk about anything. Today, I have a special guest. No, I'm just joking. It's just me. And I'm going to be talking about how we should not aim for the norm, but what should we aim for? That's what I'm going to get into, and just the challenges of fitting in today and how strong those are for us and for our kids, the desire to fit in. And how that can maybe be challenging for our desired goals, habits, and rituals or culture, or it can also in some way be uplifting if we're really mindful about it. It's interesting giving podcasts alone, and I definitely want to get better at it. But I hope you enjoy this podcast and that we can really build family culture that we truly wish for. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast School of Love. Today I wanted to talk with you about normal and how that should not be our goal. We shouldn't be normal. So I got to this idea because I had a conversation with one of my kids about what's normal today in this world. And it's actually quite heartbreaking if you look around and see what is normal, especially in family life, in children's lives. Whether you look in rich societies, middle class, or poor societies, it's everywhere. There's divorce, there's very unintimate marriage, and disconnected families, high screen use that are seeking to replace true connection, pornified media and porn consumption, and also the culture, especially around sex. It's more of a performance rather than intimate connection between a couple. So the thing is, people see this kind of culture and they copy it. And then they wonder why they aren't happy, like that couple in Hollywood, or like this person in this series, or in this book, or wherever. Because this is kind of human nature. We copy, we blend into the crowd. I read this book, Atomic Habits, and they talk a lot about this, that humans are herd animals. We naturally want to fit in, and we seek the approval of our peers. Our earliest habits in our lives, when we're even just starting to crawl and walk, we don't choose those habits. We just imitate. That's already a lot to think about as a family, that we can really either give our child great habits to imitate or break our child with the habits that we have. I think I've talked about this before, but if you look at least in Germany, there are all these packages for cigarettes. And on these packages, there are images of all the wrong things that can happen if you continue to smoke. Really terrible images, honestly, and not kid-friendly, but there they are every time at the cashier desk. And one of those is a child with a cigarette in its mouth. And that's how it is. If an adult smokes and they have a child, that child is 4 times as likely to start up smoking themselves. This is just a scientific fact. And what they also talk about in Atomic Habits is human beings, we imitate the close, the many, and the powerful. What does that mean? The close are the people close to you, your family, your relatives, your friends, people you see every day. We tend to imitate them because we want to fit in. And the same thing is also with the many. The many is basically when you are with a bunch of people, even if you don't know them, all of them are doing a certain thing, then we generally try to fit in as well. So why did Atomic Habits even mention this? Because one of the best ways to create great habits that you actually want to have is to join a community that has those habits. So what can we do with that as parents? we can create an atmosphere with the habits that we want for our kids and live with those habits ourselves as parents. You know, phone use can be a really, really hot topic. And if we want good habits for our children, then we need to model that ourselves as parents. And yeah, another thing that I thought of is, cleaning habits. So I first thought, I want my kids to have a great childhood. I'll do all the cleaning. So not only is that very stressful, but it's also, I realized that's not the kind of habit that I want my children to grow up with, thinking that someone else is going to do the cleaning all the time. I want them to be able to enjoy cleaning even because it's a thing that naturally needs to take place in someone's life if they're going to be in a healthy environment. So we've changed things, and things are always developing, never ideal. But yeah, now the culture in our family is really, okay, how can we clean? How can we contribute to the whole? And yeah, this is the kind of mindset that I hope my kids will really take up themselves when they also grow older, right? And so not only in this area, but in other areas, like just learning to learn, like not studying because I feel pressured, I want to do well on this test, but just so I know how to learn so that I can take up the skills that I want in the future. This is also a habit that we hope that our kids will generate for the future. Yeah, and then the many. So what we can do with the many is to support our child in finding a great community. I found that workshops are really helpful. If you have workshops close by, or not even that close, but even just the same language that your child speaks, it can be a great way for your child to connect to peers with the same values that, that we're trying to teach individually as a family. But sometimes, it might be that changing schools is necessary. If a school is very influencing your child, if you notice they're being strongly influenced, then maybe you have to change schools or move to find a really great community where there are more children the same age as your kid. And then there's the powerful. So human beings, we also often are highly influenced by the powerful. And so, sometimes you can see people following the powerful in a good way, and then sometimes in a not so good way. Because powerful, what does that mean, right? It means highly influential. And there are lots of influencers, or even just actors, people that are very prominent in the media that aren't necessarily a great example to us, but people still follow, their trends or what they say or what they believe. What can we do with that? I mean, we can share with our children about people that truly inspire us as parents. Who do I look up to? And we can share about that and share why, and ask them, who do you look up to? And why do they look up to those people? So anyway, that's about the close, the many, and the powerful, and how much that can influence us, influence the habits that we take on, influence what we find is normal. I want to talk about the many, okay? So the many is often the case that we're faced with. It's me and the many. And like James Clear said in Atomic Habits, we're herd animals. We want to fit in. We want to be accepted rather than, banished. You can't return to this land. That's like the worst punishment ever. Way back when, we had no other social connection other than just living together. In his book, James Clear talks about social experiments that were made to see how strong this fitting in with the many really is, in just so instinctive in us human beings. Like, I'm sure you've probably seen things like videos about this, but sometimes there's a group of hired actors that are in the know, and then a whole bunch of people that are not. But these people are kind of individually come in contact with these actors. And even when all these actors give an answer to a question that is obviously wrong, this one individual feels so much pressure to conform, even when it goes against what they think, what they believe, their true opinion. And why is that? It's just this super strong feeling that I need to fit in. I need to be approved of. I want to be accepted. These kinds of studies show that us people sometimes will do whatever it takes just to fit in, even when it goes against our character or our well-being or what we believe in. And James Clear says, because sometimes the reward of fitting in is even better than the reward of being right. He calls it the seductive pull of the norms. And the norms are sometimes very seductive, and we have to be careful about that, because the normal way to act in a crowd can be sometimes so much more powerful than our own desire of how we really want to act. True Father is a great example of someone who truly acted in the way he thought was right, regardless of what was going on around him. And that's how true parents continue to live today. So think back for you, when was a time where you were really confronted or pressured to act a certain way, but it didn't quite align with how you thought you should act? I have definitely quite a few examples. A few months back, I was in a Latino dance class, which I truly, truly enjoyed. And one thing I love about it is the teacher. She has so much energy. So I live in Germany, and she really contrasts with the German energy, which is kind of, if you get to know people, they're friendly and welcoming. But if you don't know them so well, it might seem a little bit stiff and cold. And she comes from Colombia, where she's just like a ball of energy, warm and loud. And she gives that off during the whole dance time. And, sometimes she's like yelling out to us, yeah, do you want to do this dance? Do you want to do it one more time? How was that for you? And then, my natural instinct is I want to say, yeah, it was great, or just some kind of feedback. But when no one says anything, then I feel like I can't say anything either. And then there's just this knot of contradiction that's pulling inside me. And, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. I'm sure you guys have experienced this in some way or other. Or another example is there's this forest that my kids and I love to hike in. And it's funny because often in this specific forest, we see a group of police men and women that go through a certain training. Because there's a little pond and you can cross it. There's like a 3-point rope where you hold on and you balance on the rope in between. And so what the police often do is they do this little challenge where they're blindfolded and they have to cross on this rope. And so once I saw one policeman who was crossing, these are like young future policemen. They're pretty, they're still training to be an actual policeman. And this one guy, he was really messing up. He was like wobbling, he was nervous, and you just felt sorry for him. And then the people that were, I guess, his team, they were making fun of him. They were yelling things like, oh, you're going to fall, you're going to splash into the water, because, there's a pond underneath. And you could see this was obviously not helping. And this was such a disappointment, for me to behold. And I was just saying, like, what kind of team is that? And, my instinct was, I should yell something positive to him. I should say, hey, you go, you can do it. And sadly, I didn't say that, Of course I didn't, yell negative things joining this mean team, but I still didn't yell out the true things that I wanted to say in my heart. So yeah, we have these kinds of situations, and of course they don't, I wouldn't call them big sins, but they are chances for us to really live our authentic selves or conform to the norm. One example that also comes to mind was actually when I was an adolescent, and my high school teacher, he knew that I was from the unification movement, and he asked me, so yeah, I heard that you guys do arranged marriage. How do you feel about that? Like, what if you get someone ugly? What are you going to do? Are you going to say yes no matter what? And, obviously I was also not the most outgoing person. So this did make me very uncomfortable. Somehow I kept my integrity then, and I said, yeah, I'm gonna get matched. Back then it was still True Parents doing matching, so I said I'm gonna trust them and do my best, and yeah, that's how I'm gonna get married. He kind of wanted to pressure me, but thank God one of my classmates kind of dissolved the tension just by saying, I'll marry you, and then everybody laughed, and luckily it was over. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of start getting into how much our kids, they do really get confronted with, the way they're living and their beliefs, especially at this time when they become slowly adults, right? When they start going through puberty. Yeah, so this conforming to the norm, it is a challenge for our kids, it is a challenge for our teenagers, and also for us adults in our daily lives and in our parenting. So I just want us all to think about, what kind of norm am I following? There might be norms in our own lives where we're actually just going with the flow when we could be questioning that. We should think, okay, what is our own desire? And does this habit, or does this point, does it bring me closer or farther from the culture that I truly wish for my family? One thing that comes to mind is work pressure. One thing that's really great about Germany is they have a really great culture of supporting families when they have a child. So also, each time I had a baby, my husband automatically gets time off from work. I heard that in America, it's not quite the same culture. A really good friend of mine who's pregnant now even said, although her partner's work does offer money support for when a baby is born, there's still so much pressure at work to continue working, so it's like if you don't show up, it's kind of looked down upon, right? So there's also this kind of pressure, like, are you performing at work? Are you doing over hours or not? There might be these kind of things pressuring you, or this kind of culture that's influencing you, that might not align with what you truly wish for your family. So that's just some of our own culture that might be affecting us as adults, but also think of your kids. I think preteens and teens truly get challenged in this area because, like when we started, we talked about how much the normal considered in sexuality is actually so far away from what God truly wants, right? And what we're really trying to go for in blessed families, in blessed family culture. And so our kids can really be confronted, especially during puberty. So my daughter, she shared with her friends about the matching, how we have this culture of arranged marriage, and her friends found it weird. And, which might be considered a normal reaction, but it was really tough for my daughter to witness their reactions and what they said. That's not normal. That's weird. Which is painful, and so we really did our best to be there for her, to comfort her. But I was also really proud of her, she stood up for her beliefs. And, I know some adults who wouldn't even do that they don't always share about, being actually matched with their partner rather than picking them themselves. So I just want to emphasize how challenging that can really be for our children. And so what can we do to support them? Well, we can be their community in our little family and do our best to really talk about these values and why, right? If they have a direction that can be at least a stronger pull for them to keep their integrity and, be able to be authentic about what they believe in relationships, in sexuality, and in love. And also, try to help them to seek out uplifting peers. And, that's why I mentioned workshops a while back. Workshops can help them to find peers that are on the same page and aiming for the same direction. So there's this book called The Good Girl Revolution by Wendy Shallett. And this really is all about the pressures of society and how that affects adolescents. This really strong pressure of hookup culture that comes from peers is, in this book, she writes about how that is often not based on personal desire for uncommitted sex, but rather just the pressures that these people go through. They think everybody is doing this hookup culture, so I need to fit in and I need to do it too. When my daughter's friends said that arranged marriage is weird, it's probably because, they see that more this hookup culture is the norm. That's what they see is the norm. But we know that most of that is actually, it's not normal, right? I mean, that's definitely not what God made us for. And it usually ends in pain. And not only does it often end in pain, but, even though they think it's the norm now, when they push themselves to go through it, they will probably feel how painful it really is to put yourself in a relationship that, has uncommitted sex, that is not intimate. And this, I read in the book from Wendy Shallett, is called Pluralistic Ignorance, coined by Floyd, already back in 1924, Floyd Allport. And this pluralistic ignorance basically means, let me try to give you a very good definition. So you think you have different feelings from the group, but in reality, the majority have the same feelings or beliefs. Do you see what I mean? Everyone thinks that because everyone is acting a certain way, that's the norm. But in reality, everyone is actually internally struggling to fit into something that they don't feel is right. It's like the external is a complete lie, and everybody internally is suffering under that lie. And which is basically a culture of being unauthentic. So that's normal these days. If you want to define normal, it's basically the average of our surroundings, which is not such a pretty picture. So it should definitely not be our goal. If you look around the world today, it's definitely not the world we want our kids to live in forever, right? We want it to get better. So we need to be out of the ordinary. If we get into this whole thing and learn about what was the normal way to learn about sex, A friend of mine gave a really good analogy, which is learning about sex has been basically like Chinese whispers or the game telephone. You know this game? In German, it's called Quiet Post. It's when, you're sitting in a circle or standing in a line or something, and you whisper to your neighbor some information, and they whisper to their neighbor, and usually a very distorted message comes out at the end. And that's what sex education has been, because kids pick up little things here and there, they're misinformed, and then their whole picture of what sex is a really bloody picture with a lot of, lies, basically, things that are not truthful that are in that picture. And so as they grow older, they have to really sort through that. That's what's been the norm. And then at some awkward age, then they'll have an awkward conversation with their parents. And that's if they're lucky. Lots of parents didn't have that conversation at all. This conversation probably didn't help so much. So that's been the norm, but we can change that. Think of how much better it is if you are the first person to talk to your child about sex. You clear up, you define it, you give them the true meaning to it, and you become their main source of information about it. The main source of information about facts, like what is the true science of how babies are made and how sex works, but then also with the morals and the true love that goes with it, that God actually wants us to truly understand. They don't teach about that in schools, and usually not in the media, at least definitely not portrayed in the way that God created it. So if you're going to avoid this whole chain of Chinese whispers and your child learning, really random pieces of information about sex, then that does mean you'll probably have to start at a young age. But if you've been listening to School of Love and these episodes, it doesn't mean having a big conversation at the age of 4. It just means giving them little pieces of info that are based on truth and science, and drip by drip, bit by bit, you get more and more deeper into the big picture. And it's normal to feel strange in the beginning because it's going against the norm. It's not what you experienced in your childhood or maybe in your social circle even. But if you really think about the future, this will be so good for your child. If they can feel like they can come to you at any given time with any given question, then they can be guided so much more fully and healthfully and heavenly with your guidance. You are the best person to talk to your child about this very deep thing. And I also just want to emphasize how much better it is if your child knows these things before they go through puberty. Because puberty comes with a lot of challenges. Challenges of integrity, of really standing up for what you believe in and not conforming to the norm, like we talked about. But also just these internal challenges of also accepting the new changes in my body and in my mind. And if they know all these facts, what is sex, and what is God's design for it, like why did God even create it, for a wonderful, true couple to resemble God, for them to become intimate and to start a family. If they can go with those goals in mind, then that can be a real good compass to go through these, the turbulent time of puberty, and also to deal with the waves of crazy information that will confront them. So we don't need to be pluralistically ignorant. I think lots of people are living that way on many different levels and for different topics. But the divine principle teaches us, everyone has an original mind. Everyone is connected to God as God's child. And so we know a lot about the internal and how people truly feel and believe they want to be loved. If we know this, then we know that living in the most authentic way for myself is better for my neighbor, for my friend, for, my social circle. So don't be pulled by the mainstream. Find the stream that speaks to your soul, or create your own stream and pull everybody there with you. So then you give them the chance to be authentic as well. We really are creating a new culture. The Apostle Paul says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's Romans 12:2. I hope I said that right, because I'm not good at quoting the Bible, or I'm not experienced in quoting the Bible. And what does that mean? Yeah, they already said that back then. Don't conform to the pattern of this world. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that this pattern has been happening throughout time for so long. People have been conforming and conforming and conforming, and the world is still very messy. But the whole point of this quote of this Bible verse is to give us courage to reject the world's values and embrace action and thoughts that come from God, our Heavenly Parent. So, my dear parents, let's be brave, look ahead, and think where you want this world to be headed. And let's act accordingly. In some way, we're all pioneers and contributors to a better society and a better world. So we can aim for better and not aim for normal. As blessed families, we should definitely not be directed by normal. So with every habit or action or ritual, think about whether this is a healthy thing for your family. Is this contributing to strong family culture, to chanelguk, or is it just conforming to fit in? For me, this means to continuously search for God's guidance. And yeah, that's not easy always. I mean, honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm always 5 kilometers behind the finish line, just jogging and jogging and trying to find that finish line that is out of sight. But if I look around me at the landscape, I do see a difference. I do see that I'm slowly in a new place, like my kids are starting to contribute in the household and clean up, or, they're starting to open up about kids talking about sex in school or weird things that they hear, or content in books, that things are changing, in my family. And so I encourage you to just continuously search for God's guidance. Sometimes it doesn't happen like in the blink of an eye and so obviously, but if you continue to pursue what God wants for your family, there will be changes. Communication can get better. Relationships can get better. Your marriage can get better. And your friendships can become deeper. So don't try to be normal. I feel like I want to end this with some awesome quote from myself that I coined myself. But anyway, let's just leave it with what Paul said. Don't be normal, but let's be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Take care, family, and let's really try to build a great community where we have this new culture that lifts each other up, right? In Atomic Habits, James Clear was explaining that if you join a community with the new habits that you actually desire, then you can be uplifted rather than pulled down. So let's make that school of love where we lift each other up. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you guys have fun building your dream family culture. Spread the word and stay connected through YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and our newsletter, which you can subscribe to on our website, schooloflove.org. Really hope to hear from you.